right, everybody, welcome back to Eco Wealth Lab. So glad to have you with us.
Back again for another deep dive.
We appreciate you taking the time, Your attention is...
Precious.
It's super precious, right? And you could be doing a million other things right now. You could be...
You could be out there actually, buying Bitcoin.
Exactly. You could be,
living the dream.
living the dream, right? But you're here with us, and we really appreciate it. And, hopefully it's worth your time, because we really do try to...
Distill.
Yeah, distill down, what's important in the crazy world of crypto.
Absolutely.
So, let's just jump right into it, because there's been a lot happening in just the last 24 hours. We've been looking at, all the usual sources, the news articles, the market analysis, even
Social media.
Social media. Yeah, seeing what people are saying.
Always a good gauge of sentiment.
Always a good gauge, right? So
Where are people at today?
yeah, exactly. And our mission, as always, is to help you understand what's going on and what it means for you as you're navigating this crazy world.
So exactly. We want to make sure you have the knowledge you need to make informed decisions.
Informed decisions, that's the key, right? So there's two big things I think we need to talk about today. The first one being this kind of groundbreaking launch in the U.S. And then the second one being
a bit of a market turn.
A turn, yeah, not necessarily in the direction we want.
Yeah, things got a little rocky.
Things got a little rocky. So let's start with the good news first, though. We saw the launch of the very first XRP-based ETF in the U.S.
Yeah, this is big news.
This is huge. It's called the Teucrium 2x Long Daily XRP ETF. I love that name.
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. It's trading under the ticker XXRP on the NYSE Arca, and this all happened just yesterday, April 8th, 2025.
Fresh off the press.
Fresh off the press. So, what's interesting about this particular ETF is that it's not your typical ETF that, directly holds the asset. Instead, it's using swap contracts.
Yeah, so it's aiming for twice the daily performance of XRP. Twice.
Wow.
So it's a leveraged ETF.
Yeah, so you really got to be...
Not for the faint of heart.
Not for the faint of heart. You really got to be paying attention.
Right, exactly, because that means your gains are magnified, but your losses are magnified as well.
That's the risk, right?
That's the risk.
High risk, high reward.
Exactly.
So it seems like this is more for the active traders out there, the people who are really, watching the market closely, maybe even institutional investors who have a bit more of a risk appetite.
Right, it's not your typical buy and hold strategy.
No, not at all. And it also comes with a management fee ratio of 1.85% with distributions happening monthly. So
yeah, there are costs involved as well.
always costs involved, right?
You got to factor that in.
Now, if we take a step back and look at, the bigger picture, this launch really does tell us something about the institutional interest that's growing in XRP. We still have those applications for spot XRP ETFs, just, direct exposure ETFs from some big names. Wisdom Tree, Bitwise, Franklin Templeton, they're all kind of waiting in the wings.
Waiting for approval.
Waiting for approval. So it is interesting that this leveraged ETF kind of beat them to the punch.
Right. It makes you wonder about the regulatory landscape and why this particular structure was approved first.
Yeah, I mean, do you think maybe Teucrium just, found a faster way through all the red tape?
It's possible.
Yeah, and speaking of regulation, we can't ignore the recent settlement between Ripple Labs and the SEC. That seems to have, really given people more confidence in XRP and XRP-based financial products.
Yeah, that settlement definitely cleared up a lot of the uncertainty that was hanging over XRP.
Yeah, I mean, remember Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse? He was saying back in March that, he was feeling optimistic about the future, and now it looks like that optimism, it's actually starting to turn into something tangible.
Yeah, we're seeing real products coming to market now.
Real products, exactly.
And for XRP investors, this is potentially really good news because it means more liquidity. It means easier access.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you a way to get involved in XRP's price movements without, actually having to go out and buy the cryptocurrency itself.
Exactly. You can treat it just like a stock.
And the market seemed to like this news, at least initially, right on April 8th, the day of the launch. XRP went up by 6.5%, which... that's not nothing.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant jump.
That's a pretty significant jump.
Shows that the market saw this as a positive development.
Yeah, I even saw some chatter online. There's this one user on X, Virtual Bacon No X.
Love that name.
Yeah, right. They were saying that this ETF launch was, one of the top market updates. And they also mentioned that Standard Chartered is predicting that XRP could hit $12.50 by 2028.
Wow, that's just a bold prediction.
It's a very bold prediction, right? And they're also saying that we could see spot XRP ETFs, the direct exposure ones being approved as early as Q3 2025.
So later this year.
Later this year, potentially. So
things are moving fast.
Things are moving fast.
And it's all kind of coming together, right? You've got the ETF launch, the positive price action, the optimistic predictions from the big financial institutions, and then all the buzz on social media. It's like...
Yeah, it's all pointing in the same direction.
All pointing in the same direction.
Towards mainstream adoption.
Exactly. XRP is gaining legitimacy.
It's gaining legitimacy, and it wasn't just social media either. Even the mainstream news outlets were covering this. CoinDesk had an article about the launch talking about, how it fits in with those pending spot ETF applications and then crypto slate. They even had a quote from the Teucrium CEO, Sal Gilberty, who said that, this was their most successful ETF debut in terms of initial interest. So
it's like they're pretty happy about it.
Yeah, I think they're pretty happy about it. So it seems like this is a
real turning point for XRP.
Yeah, a real turning point.
Even if it's through a leveraged product for now.
For now, right.
But all this positive momentum around XRP and even the broader market, it didn't last very long, did it?
No, it did not. In fact, just the very next day, April 9th, we saw this, pretty big sell-off across the entire crypto market.
Yeah, the good times didn't last.
The good times did not last.
About $100 billion wiped off the total market cap.
$100 billion.
That's a decline of about 4%.
4%, yeah. So the total market cap now is sitting at about $2.43 trillion.
Quite a drop.
Quite a drop. And what seems to have triggered this was... Well, it was news from outside the crypto world, actually. The U.S. announced that they were imposing the huge 104% tariff on goods coming in from China.
Oof. Yeah, that's a big one.
That's a big one.
That's going to have ripple effects.
Ripple effects everywhere, right? And it did. We saw it not only in the crypto markets, but also in the traditional financial markets. The S&P 500, for example, also had a pretty bad day.
Yeah, it shows you how interconnected everything is.
It really does. And you wouldn't think that a trade tariff would have such a direct impact on crypto, but
it does.
But it does. It's a good reminder that even though crypto has its own, unique ecosystem, it's still part of this larger global financial system. And when there's, uncertainty and risk in the wider world, crypto definitely feels it.
Crypto reacts to everything.
It reacts to everything. And we saw that play out, across all the major cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin, for instance, dropped to a 24-hour low of about $74,589. Yeah, and while it has recovered a little bit and is currently trading around $77,140, that's still, a pretty big dip in a very short amount of time.
And a lot of trading volume, too.
Oh, yeah, over $32 billion changed hands in just 24 hours.
People are definitely reacting.
People are reacting, yeah. Then you've got Ethereum, which also had a rough time, losing over 6% of its value. And even XRP, which, had just gotten this boost from the ETF news. It wasn't immune to this either, declining by about 3.15%. Solana, similar story, down about 3%. So it really was this kind of,
market-wide correction.
Market-wide correction, yeah. And the sentiment shifted almost immediately. The crypto fear and greed index, which is, a measure of how people are feeling about the market, that plummeted to a reading of 15, which is...
Extreme fear.
Extreme fear.
Not a good sign.
Not a good sign at all. And then daily trading volumes across the entire crypto space dropped by nearly 35%, down to about $124.44 billion. So...
People are getting scared.
People are getting scared. They're pulling back. They're becoming much more risk averse.
Understandably so.
Yeah, and it is, kind of a stark contrast to the optimism that we were seeing just the day before.
Yeah, the mood changed quickly.
Very quickly. But what I found really interesting is that even in all this, doom and gloom, there were these little pockets of resilience. Certain cryptocurrencies like HYTE, IP, and just Shvaza MY, they actually gained over 3% during this whole crash.
Wow, that's surprising.
It is surprising, right? It makes you wonder, what was driving those gains? Were there specific catalysts, or maybe these tokens are just less correlated to the overall market sentiment? I don't know, but it is interesting. It definitely suggests that, diversification is important, and that different assets can behave in very different ways during these, market-wide events.
It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
No, not at all. But of course, we have to remember that all this was happening in an environment of extreme fear. So
proceed with caution.
Proceed with caution, exactly. Any investment decision should always be made with careful consideration and thorough research. Don't just chase those gains blindly.
Right. Research is key.
Research is key. Now, on the flip side, we also saw some pretty big losses beyond just the major coins. The AB token, for example, that one really took a hit, dropping by over 23%. Near Protocol fell by around 10%, and EOS also had a significant decline of over 8%. So,
Different tokens react differently to these events.
they do. They really do. And it just goes to show, how varied the impact can be when you have this kind of, broad economic news hitting the market.
Absolutely. It's a complex ecosystem.
Very complex. And if we think back to, all the positive sentiment that we were seeing around potential crypto regulation, this tariff announcement really kind of threw a wrench in the gears. It's like,
Reality check.
yeah, a reality check.
A reminder that crypto is not immune to global events.
Right.
Things happening outside of the crypto world can have a huge impact.
They can and they do. And news outlets were all over this, of course. Coinpedia had a really good article about the crash. They directly linked it to the U.S. tariff announcement, and they detailed the price movements of all the different cryptocurrencies and, how the fear and greed index had dropped so sharply. And then Reuters, they had actually reported earlier in the week on some of the market anxieties that were already building up, related to these potential tariff tensions.
So maybe some people saw this coming.
Maybe some people saw it coming.
They were prepared.
They were prepared, yeah.
So we look at these two big events, side by side, the XRP ETF launch and then this market crash. What are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, what should they be thinking about?
What should they be taking away from this?
Well, I think when it comes to XRP, the ETF launch is definitely a good sign. It shows that there's growing institutional interest in the cryptocurrency. And, for people who are invested in XRP, this could lead to, further price appreciation. Potentially right. But of course, we have to remember that this particular ETF is leveraged, which means it's riskier. And also we're still waiting on those decisions about the spot XRP ETF. So that could change the game even more.
Yeah, that's a big one to watch.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on that. Now, the market crash, on the other hand, that's a bit of a wake-up call. It reminds us that crypto is inherently volatile and that it's sensitive to, all these external factors, especially, things happening in the global economy and the geopolitical landscape.
Yeah, it's not a risk-free investment.
It's not risk-free at all. And I think this event might make some investors, reconsider their risk tolerance, especially when it comes to those major assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Diversification is always a good idea.
Yes. Diversification, always a good idea. And then, there's that interesting detail we talked about earlier, the resilience of those smaller cryptocurrencies like HYPE, IP, and JZNY. That's something to think about. It could be a sign that there are opportunities to diversify into assets that are less correlated with the broader market. But again, do your research.
Don't just jump in blindly.
Don't just jump in blindly, because remember, that's all happened in an environment of extreme fear. So
be cautious.
Be cautious. Be smart.
So to sum it all up, we've seen XRP take a big step forward with this new ETF. And it's a clear signal that institutional interest is growing. But then we also got this reminder that, the crypto market is still very much connected to traditional finance, and that global events can have a big impact on, sentiment and price movements.
Exactly. And, it just goes to show that staying informed and adaptable is more important than ever. So here's a final thought for you all to chew on. How do you think these kinds of traditional financial events and the changing regulatory landscape, how do you think that's going to shape the future of crypto? And, given what we saw with those resilient, smaller cryptocurrencies, are there any strategies that you're thinking about using to navigate this ever-changing environment?
It's a complex and exciting time to be in the crypto space.
It really is. Well, we hope this deep dive has been helpful for you as always. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Jump into the conversation on social media. Let us know what stood out to you, and be sure to tune in for our next deep dive where let's just say it's going to be another fascinating topic.
We've got some good stuff lined up.
We do. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and keep exploring the world of eco-wealth.